Hi again, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. Just a quick mention, please answer the poll on the system if you get a chance. That'll be interesting to see your answers on that. So the next session we're going to have a panel on IoT automotive opportunities. So I'd like to introduce you to the moderator for that session, Matt Hatton, who's the founding partner of Transforma Insights. Hi, Matt. How are you doing?
Hi, Sam. Pretty good. How are you?
Great, thanks. So I'll leave you to introduce your panel and get on with the session. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Hatton. I'm one of the founding partners at Transforma Insights, and I've been in this IoT world for a little over a decade. And even back at the start, everybody was talking about automotive as being effectively the #1 use case in IoT. Certainly, when we were talking to mobile operators who were a big part of our client base even back then. So it's a critical market for mobile, an awful lot of value being delivered. It's also one that's being disrupted at the moment. Things like electric vehicles coming in, autonomous driving. And I think we've not really quite got to grips with the implications of connecting all these vehicles. To discuss that and many more things, I'm delighted to welcome my panel. So I'm going to introduce them one at a time. Well, more importantly, they're going to introduce themselves. So I'd like to welcome first Phil Skipper from Vodafone. Phil, can you introduce yourself? I'm waiting for you to appear as if by magic. Hello, Phil. If you can introduce yourself.
Certainly. I'm Phil Skipper. I'm the head of strategy for Vodafone's IoT business. We connect over 120 million devices, and a lot of those are automotive. We have a special business called Vodafone Automotive that just focuses on the connected car and connected insurance. So very pleased to be with you today, Matt.
Smashing, thanks, Phil. And I need to also welcome Stellan from Ericsson.
Hi, thank you, Matt. So I'm Stellan Ohrn, very honored to be part of this panel today. So I represent Ericsson, we're the worldwide leader in 5G, and my specific focus is selling our IoT platform, focusing on the automotive vertical.
Brilliant. And true to form with live events, I fear we've lost our third panelist, who's Andy from Aeris. If he suddenly appears here, then that'll be miraculous, but I'm being told by chat that he's not there. But anyway, he is.
Yeah, hey, sorry about that. Little perfect timing computer.
It absolutely was. Andy, if you could just introduce yourself and just say a couple of words about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to meet everybody. My responsibility, Aeris, is business development, strategic partnerships. I've been working on the connected vehicle side for about 4 years now, and really my role is to find alternative uses for our automotive technology stack, things like moving vehicles outside of traditional consumer market, things with wheels, tracks, sleds, that move around the planet. So good to be here.
Fantastic. Welcome. Okay, so we're at a mobile ecosystem forum event. So probably the first topic for conversation should be, I guess, mobile networks. That's a good place to start. 5G and what it does and what it doesn't do. 5G is obviously flavor of the month at the moment, or flavor of the last couple of years, certainly. Phil, can I start with you? 5G, what it does and what it doesn't do in terms of connected car?
Yeah, I think what you have to do is you have to look at 5G in terms of the context of what we have today. So we connect many cars today. They tend to be on 2G, 3G, 4G services, and that's providing the vehicle telematics, it's providing the e-call services, but it's increasingly providing media services into the car. What 5G does, it actually introduces a third use case, which is around control. So if you look at what Vodafone's been doing with 5G, it's been connected cranes, trains, planes, cars, ferries, anything where there is a control aspect. Because the combination of high bandwidth and quality of service and low latency makes the network much more deterministic. So I think what you'll find is that 5G will become the platform through which things become controlled. And that's especially important when you move into areas like V2X and sort of vehicle to infrastructure. We're already there in many cases. So a lot of the work we do is around mobile private networks, where we're already controlling autonomous vehicles. These could be AGVs in factories, they could be diggers working on exploration sites and so on. But I think the trick to 5G is it opens up this third use case that is control. And for automotive, when you start talking about the connected and autonomous vehicle, that's where it really has a massive role to play going forwards.
Okay, so you can kind of think of 2G, 3G, 4G maybe as nice to haves, providing some additional add-on services rather than being more fundamental to how things change. Stellan, is that how you see things? I mean, obviously Ericsson's got quite a lot of skin in the 5G game. Do you see? Does your view of the market reflect what Phil's been talking about?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, and I think we do these Ericsson mobility reports every year, and so we expect by 2026 about 3.5 billion 5G connections. So I would add that one other thing that 5G adds to the mix is handling this density of connections. So that's another benefit, and then of course 5G is also. We see a trend, especially for automotive manufacturing, where a lot of the manufacturers are going into dedicated 5G networks in the manufacturing plants. So that's another use case for 5G.
Okay, that's sort of automotive, but the other side of automotive in terms of the manufacturing space, right? Okay, and Andy, to you now. As a virtual network operator, 5G, I mean, does that come across your table a lot? Is it something that's front and center in terms of the conversations that you have with your clients?
It's starting to. At present, a lot of the connected vehicle platform services are still relatively low bandwidth requirements, but we are starting to see that change. We do expect it to follow the same direction that my fellow panelists are talking about. We also see that the use cases are starting to expand, and we'll likely be in the midst of it. As entertainment, for example, starts to creep up, it's not hard to see that being a massive consumer of 5G service over the next few years. I mean, we're starting to see it already, where Netflix is available in your vehicle and stuff like that. So I think we haven't quite seen where the market's going to take us, but it'll certainly be exciting.
Okay, but you're seeing it more in terms of the consumer services or the in vehicle services rather than about connecting and controlling the vehicle, because obviously there's a very interesting conversation around autonomous vehicles, autonomous driving, V2X infrastructure. Right. I think you mentioned V2X, but Andy, did you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly think it's going to be there. It just hasn't been there today for us. It's still relatively low bandwidth consumption, but okay. It's not hard to see as soon as any of these, the starts of autonomous vehicles starts to come into play, that we'll certainly see the demand.
Mm. Well, let me come to you on that then, Phil, because you mentioned V2X. I think there was a sort of passing mention of it. You see that as being a significant play for you as a network operator?
Yes, I think it is. And I think it brings together a number of different things in terms of the infrastructure base. So when you look at the car today, it's pretty much untethered. The only network it runs on is the road network, and increasingly it's going to be linked to other types of network, which communications is going to be the next one. And as you then start to get into the whole V2X space, you're having to work with the vehicle within an infrastructure of many other devices in the car. So it brings into play things like mobile edge. It brings into play the ability to offload vehicles, but it also brings into play this concept of the microtransaction. So how do these vehicles moving around register with information assets around them or with other vehicles? So I think what you'll find, and it comes back to the Ericsson chap who said, look, it's all about density. I think you're absolutely going to, you're absolutely right. You're going to find that there's far greater numbers of smaller transactions which are happening in a much more automated way to make this ecosystem work. Mm-hmm. So I think we see that infrastructure being a key part of enabling autonomy within transportation, be that the autonomous car, but we also shouldn't forget different ways of accessing mobility, for instance, in car sharing schemes or shared mobility or public transport integration. So I think as an infrastructure play, 5G is going to become very important.
So it kind of stitches the connected car into a wider range of things. Well, I mean, for one, it would involve the electric vehicle charging network. You know, you need to book in for your charging, or it might allow for multimodal transportation, where you can get a vehicle and then it will tell you to go to a train station and jump on a train and away you go. Stellan, how much do you think within Ericsson about this integration of the connected vehicle into other elements of or other networks, into, I don't know, energy or other transportation grids?
Yeah, it's happening as we speak. Unfortunately, I think, especially if we look at the private and public side, I mean, there is partnership, but there's definitely lack of funding on the public side, and we see globally, if the government is not very forceful in terms of dictating for these different ecosystems to work together, it's a very slow rollout. So I think, you know, you will see probably use cases first from a safety perspective, where there might be benefit for the vehicle manufacturers to get data from the public side in terms of maybe information from, you know, the traffic systems, and then for the OEM to share data back to the public sector, so they can redirect those messages back to other cars, you know, buses, etc. So there needs to be some kind of message exchange in between there, and who's going to pay for this? I think that's a big question still to be solved.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so networks, we only have 30 minutes. I'm going to have to move swiftly on to another topic. So implications of connecting machines, connecting all of these vehicles that we're talking about, and a shift to mobility as a service. Now, Andy, I think this probably plays into quite a lot of the sort of area that you look at with connecting other things. Are you seeing a fundamental shift to a more service-based environment, rather than, you know, historically people have owned a hunk of metal that sat on their drive? How do you see it fundamentally changing the environment?
We do. We're seeing a large expansion of the use cases for different things, especially moving things, and the business models are changing as we go. But it's predominantly based on IoT as a service, so to speak, and so we think that's only going to continue to grow over the next few years. And we will be adapting to, you know, different use cases require different business models, and, you know, we, and I'm sure the other companies that are in the game, will start to adapt those business models and offer what they need so that they can ensure success of the program. Because at the end of the day, if the program's not successful, then obviously nobody's going to sell anything. So yeah, I completely agree with that.
Okay, good. I should know, and I didn't earlier. Anybody who's watching, V2X, vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to vehicle. So V2I or V2V. So V2X is a sort of generic term for that, just in case anybody was confused by that one. I should also ask you, if you've got questions out there in audience land, just tap them in the question box, and they'll make their way through to me, and I'll ask them to the panel. I've got a bunch of pre-prepared ones, and I'll keep on going with those. Phil, I wanted to come to you on this same-ish topic about this idea of long-term implications of connecting vehicles, and this move to more of a service-based model. Long-term implications. How do you see that playing out? Quite significant changes by the looks of things.
Yeah, I think at the heart of this is a change in ownership thinking around mobility. So I think you're going to find that if you look at the way that planning is moving in terms of the way cities are structured, they're becoming much more integrated in terms of their mobility scheme. And you're also going to see much more mobility actually taken on the move. And I think this is the exciting bit. So everyone now has a very flexible user interface in their pocket. It's called a smartphone. You've got high value assets on the street, be these scooters, bikes, or cars, that can be purchased. And then, of course, the annual processes that we have for things like insurance and MOT and licensing and the rest of it suddenly become ticked through 90 degrees. So for every transaction, there's a validation phase, and there's a payment phase, and there's a checking phase, and eventually there's a returning to service phase. And I think that's where connectivity has this really strong role. It's able to relink these processes that are typically done once a year into fragmented processes that can be reconnected for every journey that's going to take place. And I think that's the really important thing. Be that, a ticket that takes you across light rail, transportation, vehicles, bike hire, through to car hiring shared vehicles without actually having to be a member of the exact scheme. So I think that's where you're going to see a real change in the way people consume mobility. And I think that's going to be the really exciting bit you're going to see, particularly in the urban environment.
Okay, interesting. Moving on to another subject, I've got one eye on the time constantly. Stellan, can I come to you on the question of, okay, so you work with auto manufacturers quite a lot, I know.
Correct.
How do they see the market? How do they see the market for connectivity? Do they want to be MVNOs? Are they happy having a strong relationship with network operators?
I think today I have to be careful here because Phil is on the call, but I think it's kind of a love-hate relationship, right? So,
sure.
That's fair, but I think it's a very disruptive business model if they're going to go to a private virtual network or a MVNO aspect. So. You need the communication service providers in the mix. They provide a value, and they have to continue to provide value to OEMs. And I think as long as they do that, there's no need for the OEMs to go to an MVNO business model. But it's very different from region to region. So and of course Vodafone is a global player, so I think they still have a good future ahead of them. So.
Yeah, I just add that we're seeing the same thing. Again, Vodafone and the other MNOs do a fantastic job, but we've seen the OEMs actually start to look for a company a middleman to actually manage the multiple relationships, just given the complexity of it. Again, it's still phenomenal service, but when you're doing multi-region, multi-geographies, launches, there's a lot of complexity, and a company in the middle to actually manage that has been successful. Not saying that's just strictly an MVNO, but could actually be just a service manager across the different carriers.
Right to reply, Phil? Let me give you that.
We've built our business on global connectivity, so we sort of provide that. So you put one SIM in the car in Germany and it works anywhere. I think your other point is sort of more relevant around how do you manage the service construct. So I think this is the point where the OEMs manufacture centrally and distribute globally. When you move into a more service model, there's then going to be local services that need to be supported. And I think that's when it becomes, that's a bit of blue space, which I think other people can actually move in and operate local schemes in the same way that sort of dealers do, but in the connected car world.
Yeah,
and I think you can draw a parallel to the mobile phone, in terms of 4G, how that created app economy. So as long as the manufacturers are able to introduce services that's valuable for the end user, they're going to own that value chain, to say. But then if over the top players comes in and create some unique application that the end users and enterprises need, I mean, they're going to take over that value chain and make more money, so to say.
Sure. Right. We have a question from the audience. This might be predicated on the idea that autonomous driving is going to be very successful. But anyway, the question is, how does the automotive industry go about reassuring the general public that connected vehicles really can be safe? I'm assuming they're talking autonomous vehicles. Although security is a challenge for, I mean, we've seen Jeep hacks, we've seen all sorts of things associated with that, right? So challenges with security. Andy, haven't come to you for a little bit. How do you see that as playing out?
Yeah, when we're talking to OEMs, it's the first, second, and third priority. And so even within our connected vehicle platforms evolution, we've gone through several series of different security schemes, and they just simply keep evolving. and we're going to have to keep evolving in order to stay ahead of the other, the people that are trying to do bad. And so I think it's going to continuously be a focus, and it'll be tested and tested and tested as the different OEMs look at the platforms and decide what's the current level that they need.
Mm. So it's a I mean, it's obviously an iterative approach, right? And right. it just these issues present themselves and then they get resolved. I mean, we haven't had a major hack for a while, I don't think. Anybody aware of anything significant for a while?
Not that I know of. I mean, we're going, obviously there's bad people out there, and good people make mistakes. And so I think, we just always have to try and stay a little bit ahead, and we have to know how to recover. And it's top of mind for everybody in the connected vehicle programs.
Yeah, and the other side of that coin is the vehicle design itself, the architecture inside the vehicle. And I think right now most of the OEMs are looking to probably their third major shift in design when it comes to vehicle architecture, when they go to more like a zonal physical architecture where they have dedicated system maybe for safety that's much harder to penetrate and not open to the rest of the world, so to say. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a maturity question, as mentioned. Yeah, absolutely. Andy, actually, I want to come back to you my next topic. So any more questions from the audience, please do put them in the chat. Andy, data monetization. Now, we all talk about, okay, it's a bit of a banal statement now that the value of IoT is in the data. We all know that, right? But is that where the focus is? Is that, to what extent is there the opportunity to make money out of the literally exhaust data from vehicles in some cases?
Yeah, not only is it extremely hot topic with all of the OEMs, and there's a number of different strategies being deployed by them, but we believe it's a huge opportunity. I think the number that I saw in one of the McKinsey reports was $450 to $700 billion between by 2030. So it's huge, and it offers not only a solution to engagement by the end users, but also to support a lot of the connected vehicle programs that are out there today. And I think we're just going to see an evolution from things like data ownership and data privacy, and that's going to continue to evolve over the next few years. And I would say at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of control by the consumer as to what's being shared and how it's being monetized.
Oh, okay. So the idea being that whatever the data is that's produced by your vehicle, that belongs to you.
I think it'll probably be shared depending on if it's actually produced by the actual vehicle, or if that data is in some way produced or enhanced by the driver. For example, things like preferences or location, things like that, versus if it's a DTC code thrown off by the vehicle.
Okay, that makes sense. And Stellan, when you're thinking about Ericsson platforms relating to connected vehicles, to what extent is this idea of monetizing additional data from the vehicle part of the proposition that you're envisaging? How do you see that evolving over time?
So our play is the full stack, where we have this service innovation layer that we give to OEMs for them to rapidly introduce new services. So we don't go into that layer, but we see in the upper layer, we see a lot of the hyperscalers taking a much more aggressive approach to get to the large OEMs. But however, the large OEMs are very afraid of the hyperscalers to come in and take the ownership of that customer data and customer experience. So I think it's still to be played out, but the OEMs have to show that with their own applications inside the car that they will still be superior to whatever, like an Android or a Microsoft comes into the car with. So the OEMs are putting a lot of research into software development, and hopefully the end users will stick to the OEM's services, but there's also a risk that over-the-top player come in and take that customer relationship away from them.
Yeah, we're seeing that play out quite consistently, and I agree with Stellan that it's kind of it's a big concern for the OEMs that the hyperscalers could take over and kind of make it into the general internet type of economics. But I do think that they're going to retain a lot of control, either by building or adapting some of the hyperscaler solutions, or choosing their own.
I think it also depends a little about who's going to be the buyer of the vehicle. So I think a lot of this is, if you look at it and say, we do that already for fleet management, we do it already for insurance. We do millions of crash reconstructions based on information we get from the car. So I think you need to look at it in different segments. So in an enterprise segment, that data is already monetized today in multiple different ways. The real question is, can you monetize that data in the B2C type environment where there's not such an enterprise need? So fleet management has been using this data. We use it already to enable fleets to transition from diesel and petrol into electric. We use the driver academy to be able to manage driver scoring in a really sort of advanced way. And I think that's it's this idea of just because it generates data, does it actually generate any value? And the answer, it depends who wants to buy it. So I think it's very much about focusing on specific, particularly enterprise groups who are ready to see the value and monetize it right now.
I think you also touched on a very interesting point. We're almost at the end, but one interesting thought. If you've got an environment where, okay, everything's connected, maybe you move to an environment where actually we've seen a lot more use of Uber, a lot more use of shared vehicle ownership and so on. Maybe we go to an entirely shared ownership model, and none of us has a vehicle sat on a drive in future. Is that something we think is facilitated by IoT? Do we think that's likely? Phil, I'm going to go to you first, and then I'll ask the other two guys.
And I think so as a yes, because the value of the asset which is parked on the street is high. Mm-hmm. You need to protect the asset. You need to remotely lock it, unlock it, check it, insure it, check the license, and more importantly, return it back to service. So I think that's where you need to be able to deliver these services on the fly. And that means you need a connected car, a mobile network, and a smartphone.
Andy, can I ask same question to you, just as we've got just a few seconds left, so very quick response on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll continue to gain importance. Frankly, I think it'll just shift a little bit. Instead of having necessarily focus on the car as much, you might focus on the passengers or what they're doing and their preferences and their location.
And Stellan?
Yes, echo everything they said, plus a sustainability plug. So 95% of the cars are parked today. So imagine what we can do with the cities when we can get rid of all these parking spaces downtown.
Absolutely, gentlemen. We could have done this for 3 or 4 hours. I'm sure, and we only had 30 minutes. But thank you, Phil, Andy, Stellan, much appreciated. I should hand back now to Sam, and I'm exactly on time. First time for everything.
Thank you.